Thornburgh, President and CEO of the Committee of 70 here at our world headquarters in Philadelphia. We have an election coming up on November 5th, important elections, city council, mayor, judicial races, both local and statewide, and we're doing our best to let you hear from candidates about where they stand, how they feel about Philadelphia, and what they would do for you as the citizens of Philadelphia. We extended the invitation to all of city council candidates. We've got at-large races and district races. And I'm pleased to welcome current city councilman Allan Domb, who's going to be with us for the next 15 minutes or so. Allan?
David, nice to see you.
All right, nice to
Thank
see
you.
you too. We have about 15 minutes. We're going to try to cover a fair amount of territory, but let me start off with every pollster's favorite question, but I think is one that's often on the minds of people of Philadelphia. Is the city of Philadelphia on the right track or the wrong track? And if whichever you choose, what's going well and what's not going so well?
Great question. I think the city is on the right track. I think that, look, we're creating more jobs than we've ever created in the past 20 years. And this economy in Philadelphia is a lot about jobs, employment, and opportunity. And the more jobs we can create, the better we can take people out of poverty. We have some metrics that are not positive metrics. For example, 40% of our population in the city every day commutes to a job in the suburbs, which is not good. That's 211,000 people. New York City's 15%. And there's reasons for that. 81% of the people who left Philadelphia from 2010 to 2017, and I mean all of Philadelphia, 81% did not have children. And they left for two reasons. One, taxes, and two, job opportunities.
So it's not about schools like
has not been about the schools, even though that's what we've been told. It's really about our tax structure. And the two taxes that come to mind of the issues are city wage tax and, of course, the BERT taxes. There's a reason why there's 7 vans or 8 vans a day picking up our millennials in Philadelphia who commute to Valley Forge to go to Vanguard. Here's the positive thing. We have the talent. We have millennials, we have baby boomers, we have the talent in the city, which is the most important commodity of any company looking today, any asset they have, it's talent. You need talent. So eventually, I do believe if we can adjust these tax structures a bit, we'll bring those companies into the city. We need to bring more of these suburban companies to open a branch or move their companies back into the city because we need those jobs. Mm-hmm. And, you know, past 3-4 years, just give a little brief overview of what I've been working on is I'm the 1 year and a half ago raised their hand and said, hey, where's the $33 million not accounted for? And why do we have 7 accounts not reconciled?
This is in the city's cash management.
Right, cash management system, right. And we also had 7 accounts not reconciled. I didn't say this too publicly, going back from 2010 to 2017. And when you added up the deposits and the withdrawals, the total unreconciled dollar value was over $100 billion not reconciled. Now, the good news is the administration has reconciled almost 99.9%, which is great. And we found of the 33 million that was not accounted for, everything but about $500,000. I did pass a bill with my support of my council members asking for monthly reconciliation reports to the administration. So we are on top of this going forward. But that was a really big issue.
This is the equivalent of back in the old days when you had a paper checkbook. If you didn't pay attention to you or your spouse would write, all of a sudden they call you up and say,
absolutely,
there's nothing left in your
right,
account.
Right.
Stop writing checks.
We have another, more recently, I put in, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, I put in a resolution asking for the controller to audit our One Philly payroll system. And that's a system that's going to cost us close to $50 million. We still have people who've either been paid too much or not paid enough. And it's just a disaster as far as the system is concerned. So we really need to look into that. What happened? How do we fix it? And how do we move forward?
Just to push that a little bit, what difference does that make to citizens of Philadelphia? That sounds like an administrative issue. You know, it's a little unclear as to exactly what's going on.
How do you think residents who pay their taxes to the city feel if they were to hear 3,000 to 5,000 people were either underpaid or overpaid, and it's been going on for months, back since May, and it hasn't been rectified? In fact, some of the unions now have sued the city or threatening to sue the city over this issue. And when you see a lawsuit coming from a union on the city, that means they've been trying to work it out and it hasn't been resolved. All I'm suggesting is let's get this resolved, get the people who are owed money, the money they're due, people who we overpaid, let's work out a plan to get that money back. Mm-hmm. And also affects like the pension. Look, this is an accounting nightmare. all these deductions were paid to the pension. They may have to come back to the city. So that's got to get resolved.
You started out by talking about jobs and economy and where people are moving for jobs. Do these administrative issues relate to that?
Well, I think it's an overall message. It's an overall message that, people like to be in an environment where they feel their tax dollars are being managed efficiently. And it's just an overall messaging. And look, to the administration's credit, they did fix the reconciliation issue. They did find 99% of the money that was unaccounted for. So those are all good things. And by the way, that reconciliation went from 2010 to 2017.
Yeah.
That wasn't all under this current administration.
Right. So these are issues that, these administrative issues, these management issues that usually are the focus of the chief executive in the city. Not necessarily, there aren't that many council people that sort of dig into these. So would you rather be the chief executive?
I feel as a council member, our responsibility is to approve the budget. And look, I am not happy at the fact that under Michael Nutter, by the way, our budget went up 80 million in 8 years. And under the current administration, the budget's gone up close to $1 billion in 4 years, from 4 billion to almost $5 billion. That's almost like a 25% increase in 4 years, which is like 6.25% a year, which is not the rate of inflation, which is why people are complaining about my real estate taxes went up a lot. Real estate taxes 7 years ago were billed at $1 billion. Say they're 1.7 billion.
And what do constituents ask you when you raise those numbers? Do they say, well, what are you guys doing there? I mean, how, or in the conversation with your colleagues in council, with the administration, what's the answer about where that 20% increase has gone?
Well, if you look at where the money went, about 130 million went to schools. That's great. About 400 million went for contracts and so forth. We hired a lot of new people. So what we haven't done is made ourselves more efficient. I'm not sure if that's possible in government. I do think it is possible. We haven't done two things. We haven't made ourselves more efficient, and we haven't really invested in the tax structure. Governor Rendell, when he was mayor, invested in the tax structure. Mayor Street invested in the tax structure.
What do you mean when you say invest in the tax structure?
Here's the example. We have the slightest reductions in the wage tax right now. Everyone's saying, oh, you're reducing the wage tax. Yes, for $50,000 of income, we're dropping it $5 per year. I mean, that's not really an investment.
It's barely a high-end latte.
Right. It's not an investment in the structure. But if we were to take, for example, the city wage tax, which is roughly 3.8, over the next 10 years, down to maybe 3%, or if we were to take the BERT taxes, which prevent companies from coming into the city, especially the net income, and dramatically adjust those taxes so we could attract them into the city, that's an investment in our tax structure. And by the way, it's a short term, it's harder for us to manage everything, but in the long term, we'll build the tax paying base.
Are you confident, you're one of 17 council people, are you confident that you and your colleagues can sort of get behind that kind of a program, working with the administration? I mean, it's a classic, push-pull, give and take with the administration.
I think if my colleagues could see the benefits of the jobs that would be created in the city and the job creation, I think they can get behind it. Well, let me talk for a minute, David, about something I introduced 2 or 3 weeks ago that really upsets me. We did the research that shows of the top 50 cities in the United States, we tax people in poverty the highest. It's kind of a disgrace. 18.1% on 25,000 of income. Most other cities are 7 to 13%.
Yeah.
And it's the wage tax that's creating this.
Yeah.
Of the top 50 cities, 11 or 12 have a wage tax. Our wage tax is huge because of uniformity issues for lower income people. So I introduced a bill that I hope will get passed that basically credits back the wage tax to lower income families. People who can barely put food on the table, we're charging them wage taxes, which makes no sense. And then we wonder why we have the highest poverty, because we're taxing people in poverty the highest.
Yeah. That reminds me, going in the Wayback Machine, I think this was an issue for former Councilman David Cohen, who I'm not going to presume, but maybe you and he weren't always on the same page ideologically or politically. But it seems to me he introduced something similar to that.
He had something similar that was then eliminated by, I think, the mayor at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But my argument for this is the average refund would be $700 per household. It would affect 60,000 households, potentially 90,000 individuals. And in 2024, when the PICA bonds burn off, because we're pledging 1.5 of the wage tax to PICA, it could be $1,300 per household. 60,000 households will get $1,300 a year. That's a lot of money for a 32,000 family of four. And it costs the city, if 100% of the people take the program, which never happens, but if they do, it's about $40 to $42 million. And someone may say, well, how do you pay for that? The natural growth of wage tax for the next few years is projected, just the growth, 80 to 82 million a year. Half of the growth could help 90,000 individuals or 60,000 households, which to me, we should absolutely do. And by the way, those people getting that $700 now and $1,300 in 2024, they're not putting it into an IRA or 401k. They're investing that, putting it back into the local economy, and they need it.
And are your folks assure you that that'll pass constitutional muster? Because you mentioned the uniformity clause, which is everybody's favorite roadblock on these tax issues.
So we do have a way with that. We've figured out with the law department how we can make it happen. It's already in place, and how it works basically for a family of four. The two adults each get a $6,500 credit, which is $13,000. Each child gets $9,500, which makes that about 19. So between the two, you get up to $32,000 for a family of four.
This, I think, is similar in spirit, and I know we're getting in the weeds here. It's similar in spirit to the federal earned income tax credit.
Yes, it is.
Which has been, I know folks like Charmaine Matlock-Turner at the Urban Affairs Coalition has been a supporter and promoter of that, because for the same reason, it literally, puts money back in people's pockets.
Right. Well, that's a very good point. I mean, from the beginning, I've been a big supporter of the earned income tax credit, because we still leave $100 million on the table that could go to 40,000 Philadelphians who qualify. Average refund $2,500, and you can file back 3 additional years. So you could get 4 years times 2,500 or 10,000. It's pretty powerful. There's a company that the city engages called Benefits Data Trust. BDT.
Oh yeah.
They do a great job. They've outlined for me a chart that shows of the federal and state money that Philadelphians don't apply for, the total dollars we leave on the table. $450 million.
Yeah, that's a terrific organization that I think has sort of pioneered the cross matching of databases and making sure that if you apply for, because let's just note that government often gets very siloed, and they don't necessarily think to say, oh, by the way, there's another program over there in some other department that you ought to take advantage of. And that's what they just got a big grant from the Rockefeller Foundation.
Yeah, I saw that, about $7 million or something. They actually can take, a person calls in, they're on their headsets, they have 100 people on computers there. They match the people to the program and make sure they get the money. It's a great program.
Well, let's pull back out of the weeds. And let me ask you this sort of fundamental question, which I think is a good fundamental question for anybody running for office, which is, what would you always support and what would you never support? Either an idea, a bill, a proposal. What would you always or never?
Well, I think what I always support is the fact that we're the biggest city with the highest poverty level. We have the highest poverty of the top 20 cities. So I would always support measures to take people out of poverty, and mostly through good jobs and employment. That's the only way people get out of jobs. I support education. I put in a resolution back in February after I've supported 177 public school teachers myself. They're taking financial literacy courses at the Federal Reserve, where they're teaching from pre-K to 12th grade financial literacy. Also supported many coding and tech programs. I put in a resolution that I would love our state representatives and our state senators to pass, which is the following. 1, teach mandatory financial literacy pre-K to 12th grade in all of our schools. Teach it. Teach coding and tech pre-K to 12th. Teach entrepreneurship 7th to 12th grade. And then 9th to 12th grade, allow students 1 day a week to work in a job and go to school for 4 days a week. So they have 4 different job experiences. So all those I would always support. What I would not support, I don't really like particular bills that are very city specific, because I don't want to give the suburbs the edge that companies will move out of the city. So I would always support things that enhance citizens of this city and benefit the city. As an example, I voted for the beverage tax. But I've recently seen reports that 42% of our sales of beverage are in the suburbs. I do think we should study that and figure out, is there this point of elasticity where if we take the tax from 1.5 to 1 or 0.9, can we capture those 42% of the people buying beverage outside back into the city? Because it's not just the beverage, it's the whole shopping experience.
Well, it's sort of economics 101 that They say if you want less of something, tax more of it.
Right.
But also it recognizes that people change their behavior
That's right.
when you tax things. Well, that's a good wrap. Let me just give you another 60 seconds or so to just sort of, you're seeking reelection. So let me give you 60 seconds to sort of make your case that you deserve reelection, that you're the right person at the right time in the right office to do some of the things that you talked about.
Thank you. Well, I'm running as a Democrat, but in my position, I feel I represent Democrats, Republicans, well, every Philadelphian in the city, independents, everybody. And I feel in many ways we need to work together to accomplish more. We can't be on either side of things. We need, by governing, what I've learned in the last 4 years, governing really is finding that middle ground where people can work together and move forward. If we get entrenched on either side, we're not going to, as you can see in the federal level, we're not going to make a lot of things happen. But on a local level, if we can bring things together and move forward, that to me is the most important thing. I will say this, my most important goal for me is not just the job creation, but seeing that we teach financial literacy, pre-K to 12th grade, coding and tech, pre-K to 12th grade, entrepreneurship, and I'll tell you why. 78.8% of entrepreneurs in Philadelphia, 78.8% are white, 10% are Asian, 2.4 African American. We need to teach 7th to 12th grade entrepreneurship. To me, that's super important.
Yep.
And then allowing them to have a job one day a week. Drexel co-op students, interesting statistic, 48% of the co-op students find a job with a company they co-op with.
Yep.
And so if we could have that relationship in a high school, we might have a lot of people who don't need to have to go to college and have that college debt and find good work and get a good job.
Yep. Good. Allan, thanks so
Thank
much
you,
for
David.
being with us.
Thank you very much.
Just remind you again, November 5th, General Election Day, 8 a.m. to 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Is open for business at your local precinct. If you want to know more about candidates, issues, and logistics, you can visit our website at 70.org. You can also download our We Vote app, which puts everything that we are happy to share with you about all of the above in literally the palm of your hand on your phone. So lots to learn. Encourage your friends, your neighbors, your relatives to vote. Take your kids to the polls with you. That's always a great thing to do. And we'll see you on November 5th.